Tonight we have a special edition of The Beat on Labor Day, exploring how Donald Trump is, yes, one of the most unpopular first-term presidents ever, and yet the paradox, he is everywhere, dividing and sweeping across culture in America, feuding publicly with cultural figures and celebrities ranging from Alec Baldwin to Chrissy Teigen, of course going after athletes and NFL players for their protests of police brutality during the national anthem. Trump has criticized many musicians who have their own followings and political leadership styles, from Madonna to Jay-Z, and they have, of course, returned fire. And then there's the feuds with the late-night comics who have Trump as a nightly punchline. In fact, look at this. A George Mason study found jokes targeting Trump eclipsed most other presidents, over 1,000 in his first 100 days alone. Now, tonight we are joined by our expert panel, including some funny people, and we're going to discuss what is happening to our culture in this age of Trump. Now, he has hit back on cultural and celebrity figures in ways unlike any other U.S. president.
We don't need Jay-Z or Beyonce. We don't need Lady Gaga. Just friends, and he's a good man. And I want to just pray for Arnold, if we can, for those ratings, okay? Even look at Roseanne. I called her yesterday. Look at her ratings.
The Women's March this weekend, and you hear Madonna.
Honestly, she's disgusting. Wouldn't you love to see one of these NFL owners, when somebody disrespects our flag, to say, get that son of a bitch off the field right now?
It's a cultural conversation, but it is at times, as you see, they're deadly serious. And to be clear, other presidents have also taken heat from prominent icons, but Trump's negative approach, the insulting, the demeaning, the obsessing over famous people, has boomeranged on him and drawn some tough rebuttals.
Instead of talking Puerto Rico with gun reform for Nevada, all these horrible tragedies, and he's bored and would rather cause a Twitter storm with the Packers.
He's now using sports as the platform to try to divide us.
If your baby is going to die, and it doesn't have to, it shouldn't matter how much money you make. I think that's something that, whether you're a Republican or a Democrat or something else, we all agree on that, right? I mean, we do.
And the powerful use their position to bully others, we all lose.
There's nothing illegal going on. It's just he's despicable.
And because we think politics is broader than just politicians here on The Beat, we've featured some of our own responses from cultural figures.
These are my anti-Trump depression glasses.
Any dude that has a comb over like that lies to himself all the time.
He wants to be popular. He wants to be a celebrity.
Come November, we're going to save democracy or we're going to lose it. That is the whole thing. If we save democracy and we turn the House, he's gone.
This is them rooting for the Joker against their own interests.
No one being above the law is like a foundational principle for us.
America knew Donald Trump as a reality show before the reality show of his presidency, blending celebrity icons and having people like Kim, Kanye, and Omarosa frame his national discourse. This notoriety, of course, extends beyond America's borders to even a Russian pop star writing a hit song about Trump's controversial ties to that country during the election. That itself has become, though, not culture, but law, as it is under investigation right now in the federal probe. The United States has embraced a kind of far-fetched hyper-reality presidency today, and that is a problem or a solution, depending on your point of view. Let's get right into it with my panel. Nancy Giles is an Emmy Award-winning commentator and host of the Giles Files podcast on iTunes. Also, she's a huge star on Instagram, where she doesn't know her own Instagram handle. Okay. We'll get to that.
We have to go there.
Danielle Belton is editor-in-chief for The Root, and Alicia Menendez, contributing editor at Bustle and a experienced Politico in her own right. Nancy, you look at that setup. It is different than other presidencies, and in many ways, it's the culture struggling to deal with a man who people didn't think would be a legitimate president in the first place.
That's true. It is really weird because we're looking at someone who has crafted his whole life around being in the news and being a celebrity. It's clear that he loves that, he lives for that, and he wants that attention in any way, shape, or form. And what's funny is, I've been thinking about this, does he even care whether it's negative attention? I think he does. He always wants it to be positive, but I think his ego is so huge that even if people are saying bad things about him, that's okay too. But the other side of it that I find so fascinating with Trump is he is so thin-skinned. If it's not praise, if he's not being, and what am I trying to say? If it's not praise, if it's not something good, if it's not something that flatters him, he can't handle it.
Right, and it's all emotional.
He totally
And you
can.
raise a great point, which is there's an actual functionality to this with him, which is as long as there is Trump and a celebrity, that's going to always lead SEO searches. It's going to lead the news.
That's right.
And so then you're talking about Trump and celebrities instead of talking about the child separation policy. But that cuts both ways, right? Because I think celebrities have been incredibly smart about the ways that they're now utilizing their platforms for political messages. So I would use someone like, do you know Jenna Ortega? She was on Jane the Virgin. She's a Disney star. She shows up at the Radio Disney Music Awards in a jacket that says, I really care, and you should too. So now you have a 17-year-old Disney star who's making a political message in a space that has typically been very apolitical.
And totally taking something that Melania in her way took and reframing it into a really smart, positive message. Yeah. Cool.
I mean, fundamentally, he's just a really sad bully. Like, it all goes back to high school, where people always assume it's the popular kids that start these fights. Like, often it's people who feel like they don't fit in. They have this outsized ego. They feel like they should be in the spotlight. They should be the star. They should be getting all this attention. And he's the president of the United States, and he, didn't win the popular vote. He's technically the biggest celebrity, in the U.S. right now, and yet other celebrities who are just as big or bigger than he is, based on his stature, won't have anything to do with him.
That hurts.
I mean, the idea that you get to be president of the United States, you're supposed to get to be friends with Jay-Z and Beyonce. It worked for Obama and Clinton.
I know. Oh, that's so true. And in that little phrase, that little clip that you showed, Ari, where he's like, who needs Jay-Z? Who needs Lady Gaga? I need them. He feels so bad that they don't like him. It does. It goes back to high school and who likes you and who don't like you.
Well, and someone who knows him very well, Howard Stern, who has done his own evolution in the celebrity space, talks about that Donald Trump, let's not forget, we're sitting around a table here in a newsroom. Donald Trump has more media experience than most of us, and most of the reporters on his campaign. He spent most of the 90s and the 2000s as a full-time media employee. This is who he is and what he does.
By this network, I might add.
And yes, full disclosure, if you didn't know, The Apprentice did air on NBC. But be that as it may, here is Howard Stern explaining, as you put it, the void he's trying to fill.
He loves Hollywood. First of all, he loves the press. He lives for it. He loves people in Hollywood. He only wants to hobnob with them. And all of this hatred stuff directed toward him, it's not good for him. It's not good.
What's interesting about that is there are many critics of Trump. Stern says he voted for Clinton. He's not coming from political agreement. When he says he's not good for him, he's speaking as someone who knows Donald Trump and basically says this is an act. He actually is media, wants to be celebrity, and is crushed that at the putative apex of his life and career, winning the presidency, he is more despised by those people that he covets than any other point in his history.
It's true, and it's this horrible chasm that can't ever be filled, because the thing that he loathes, the fact that these people that he admires don't like him, he's not a likable guy. He's kind of a piece of,
you find him, I didn't know that, you find him unlikable.
Yeah, he's kind of horrible, Ari. He's kind of horrible. And going back to the point that you made, what happens with all of this talk about the celebrity, I mean, in a way, I feel like, are we part of the problem or part of the solution? Because here we are still talking about Trump, which I'm sure he loves. But his policies are despicable. His policies that are hurting actual people, immigrants and families, and people that aren't in his I'm blanking because I get so angry. Please, someone.
I think a lot about the fact that when you talk to people in communities of color, they will say, we've always been living through these times. So when you say these political times, welcome to the party. Sure. And yet it does mean that there's been an activation that's even beyond Trump. It's hard to imagine a few years ago Anne Hathaway using her Instagram account to talk about someone like Nia Wilson and the sanctity of Black lives and a call to action for white people to pay attention to racial justice. So some of the most interesting commentary is not even around Trump himself, but around the cultural moment that we're living.
Well, so that's so interesting because that's part of what we want to delve into in this show is to take Nancy's warning, not just echoing the person in the White House, but looking at the way that culture, through the civil rights movement, through music, through obviously movies and other iconography that affects people has this shaping. There's a cynical version of it, which Roger Stone, a longtime Trump advisor, talked about, which is they thought that they could use the myth and the trickery of Donald Trump as a character to confuse voters. And Stone was quite candid about that. Take a look.
Here's the fundamental question. Is the pop culture in this country more influential now than its institutions?
15 seasons of The Apprentice not only makes him a smooth television performer, but think of the way he looked in that show. High back chair, perfectly lit, great makeup, great hair, decisive, making decisions, running the show. He looks presidential. Do you think voters, non-sophisticates, make a difference between entertainment and politics?
Alicia, the hanging question there is Roger Stone suggesting voters don't know the difference. And yet what we're living through now is potentially a moment going into the midterms where the culture and people who aren't involved in day-to-day politics are actually leaning into that power to try to grab a hold of voters and saying American democracy, as many of them have argued, is on the line.
I don't know if it's fair to frame it in terms of what voters value or what voters care about, but there is the reality in this country that name ID matters, right? When you show up, how known are you? How notorious are you? That matters. And so celebrity will always have an advantage. And to your point, now the question is, given that reality, how do you leverage that for good?
Right. And you're making the point that name ID matters. It's what Alicia Keys said when she said, you don't know my name. And how can you get the guy at the coffee shop to like you if he doesn't even know your name?
Well, I mean, everyone knows Trump's name. I mean, before he became president, I mean, he was so much part of the lexicon. I mean, you would have like rappers like Lil Wayne, drop lines like I'm gonna fire my blunt like Donald Trump. Like how do you go from?
Is that where if you fire your blunt like Donald Trump, is that where you don't actually own the majority of the blunt? You just own like the marketing rights, and other people own the blunt. Is that what that means?
I'm not quite sure. I don't think that's what Lil Wayne was going for.
He wasn't talking about a leveraged buyout for intent.
No. I think he was talking about that fire, that flame.
What about the blunt's tax returns? Can we see them? It's Labor Day. Okay, I didn't mean it.
No, it's okay. The point being, how do you go from being quoted by rappers as the signifier of wealth to being endorsed by being this favorite of white supremacists? Well, it's a new type of celebrity that he's unfamiliar with, and he'll take whatever attention he can get.
Right.
He'll take whatever attention he can get. So if it's the love of white supremacists, he could barely come across to denounce David Duke.
But it's love. It turns out in his mind to be a kind of love. Yeah. And going back to the rappers and the way that they quoted him, I mean, what Roger Stone said is very important. A lot of it had to do with how Donald Trump was portrayed.
Yes.
People believed that people not in New York. New York knows.
No, yeah,
the guy
definitely
made money off of his father's discriminatory housing. He continued to believe that the Central Park Five were guilty even when not proven. But he loves publicity and he crazed the spotlight.
Yeah.
And people here know that. But people were convinced at this image of this successful businessman.
And yet weren't we warned a long time ago, don't believe the hype?
Well, and Ari, in the end, it's like a jungle sometimes. It makes me wonder how I keep from going under.
Happy Labor Day. Nancy Giles, Danielle Bell, and Elisa Menendez. I would say only on the beat. I think that might be true. I don't know. But a great panel nonetheless. Hey, I'm Ari Melber from MSNBC. You can see more of our videos right here, or better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel below. You could have been anywhere in the world, but you're here with us, and we appreciate that.